there, my name is Katie Saints. I'm a lead therapist at Fox Valley Autism. Today I want to talk to you about helping your child gain independence. As a parent, it's our goal to help our children become as independent as possible. And sometimes this is a mixed bag because it's sad to see them get older and to see them need you less. But ultimately, this is our goal to help them become successful adults that can be as independent as possible. So we're going to tailor that to each of our clients. We have different levels of goals for what each kid can achieve, and we hope to achieve that. There's so many ABA strategies that have been proven to be effective to increase these skills and level of independence. And so I want to go over those and tell you guys about how to use those strategies and what the science says about it. We have so many tools that are proven to work, and so we want to work with you and help you use these strategies too, so that we can all be working together to achieve the same goals. So the first one I want to talk about is natural environment teaching. I'm really passionate about this one because it's really effective and it's typically not very stressful for the child at all. So what we do is we use your child's everyday life to help them learn. So it's play-based, it's fun. For example, if we want the kid to learn how to tie his shoes, we're going to go play outside in the backyard and make up an excuse for why he needs to put on his shoes. So he's getting a functional reason to work on that skill. And so through that, we're going to prompt him through the steps. We're going to fade back our prompts as he gains independence. And then when we're outside, we're going to be working on safety skills and play skills. And so the child's just playing and having fun. But in the midst of all that, there's all these therapeutic goals happening and all this practice that the child is doing, learning these really important skills. So I love natural environment teaching. I think it's great for the client to bond with the therapist or the parents, and they're having fun, but they're also learning too. And so in that, we're really aware of our prompting and fading back those prompts as much as possible so that the child is getting to practice those skills. And we're providing the child with the education they need in order to develop those skills. So this is a really important thing that we do, and we do it a lot at Fox Valley Autism. And so I'm sure that if you're in this program, you've already experienced it quite a bit. So the next one, or the next point I want to talk about in contrast to natural environment teaching is just babysitting. So I want to differentiate between the two of them. Babysitting is not natural environment teaching unless it includes those intentional scenarios where you're purposely doing activities in order to work on specific skills. Babysitting can be more passive. You can watch TV, you can let the child veg and do nothing and learn no skills. You're keeping the child alive, maybe keeping them happy, things like that. But natural environment teaching is making every activity therapeutic. It's making everything a learning opportunity that happens in everyday life. So we want every minute of therapy to be productive, even the breaks. Sometimes we let a child have a 15-minute break because we made them concentrate really hard for the last 15 minutes. But during their break, they're working on leisure skills. They're resetting their brain so that they can focus again on the next task. So all of this is intentional. And so natural environment teaching is not babysitting because of how intentional it is about including those activities that are therapeutic. So the next one I want to talk about is discrete trials. Now this contrasts from natural environment teaching in that it does not look like the natural environment. We're sitting at a table with a child and we are doing repetitions of different scenarios to help them identify different things. Like you might see us doing a matching procedure where we're having the child identify pictures, maybe community helpers, maybe we're working on labels. A basic skill for independence is being able to label things so that if somebody tells you, go to the kitchen and get some food, you know where the kitchen is, you know what the kitchen is, you know what food is edible, what food is not. This helps kids learn categorization and different things like that. So this skill requires lots of repetition. And so we work with the child, we do trials where we're asking the child questions, asking the child to identify things, and then reinforcing the child for the correct answers. So the next one I want to talk about is functional communication training. This is another one I get really excited about because it's so important. Getting our kids to be able to communicate is probably one of the most important things we can do for them. And there's a lot of different ways that we can get a child to communicate. But as far as what the research says about functional communication training, this is the absolute number one most effective way to get kids to talk. And so this can be a really intense process. What we need to do with functional communication training is create as many scenarios as possible to get the child to ask for something. So we're analyzing what does the child like, what does the child want, what motivates the child, and then we're using that to get the child to talk. So take, for example, if a child is having fun bouncing on a trampoline. We're going to bounce with them, we're going to have fun, and then we're going to pause. We're going to stop bouncing, and we're going to prompt the child, hey, if you want to bounce some more, say more bounces. And so then when the child says more bouncing, we jump again. But if the child does not say more bouncing, we wait and we hold out until he does. And so this is where sometimes compassionate parents or therapists struggle with this because you feel mean holding out. You feel like, like I feel so bad. Like I just want to give it to him. But the problem is with some of the kids we work with, they will not talk if we don't motivate them. So we need to find a way to get them to care about communication. And so this is the way that we do it. We're not going to do it for basic needs because we need to be able to withhold it if they don't talk. So sometimes this process takes a little bit, and the initial part of it, the child is frustrated because he doesn't fully understand what we're asking him. So I ask for your patience as we work on this with your child, because once the child gets what's expected of him, it goes so much smoother, and that's where you really see the language start to explode. So once the child understands, okay, they're holding out, they're prompting me to talk. As soon as I talk, I get what I want. This gets the ball rolling, and then it's not a frustrating process anymore because the child understands what's expected of him, and then the communication can grow. So in order for that to effectively happen, we need so many repetitions. Ideally, this would be prompted every minute, every 5 minutes. You know, when you're home alone with your child trying to make supper and do life, you're obviously not going to do it that much. But whatever number you can do it, if the child wants something that you can withhold, absolutely make them ask for it. You know, electronics are a perfect example of that. You know, typically kids are super motivated to have their electronics, so make them say a word for it. So initially, the words for kids that don't have any language, we accept approximations. So if the child wants a cracker, we're going to accept any variation of the word cracker, even if it's just one sound like cra or something like that. We're going to accept that just so the child learns when I make a vocalization, I get something. And so as the child develops that skill, we're going to get pickier and pickier, and we're going to have higher standards about how accurately the child says that word. So we simply work on the approximations till they can say the words clearly. Then once the child can say about 100 words, we're going to start prompting sentences. So we're going to require the client then to say a 3-word sentence, 3 to 5 word sentence. Once they get good at that, we're going to do 5+ word sentences. And then we're going to work on conversation skills and WH questions and all that kind of stuff. But the key to making this work is a ridiculous amount of repetitions. And we try as therapists to make it really fun. So we're doing really motivating things with the child and then pausing it to get them to talk, then playing some more, then pausing. And so hopefully this is a fun learning environment for your child to help them understand how to communicate more. And we're using things they care about so that they're motivated to talk. So sometimes we use things like iPads, PECs, signs, things like that. The research shows that if a child is saying approximations of words, making sounds, can say a few words, that chances are pretty likely that they are going to be able to develop even more words. So I typically don't recommend that we work on pushing PECs or iPads in place of verbal communication if they're saying words and things like that. So a lot of times we use PECs and signs and iPads to partner. And so we might use an iPad for identifying what the child understands receptively, where we're saying, hey, show me a food item, and the child might point to a food item in his iPad. Or he's trying to ask for something and we can't understand it and he's not capable of saying it in a way that we can understand. Then we might pull out an iPad and say, hey, show me in here what you want. So sometimes we will use that if the child's not capable, but if the child's saying a few words, I really recommend pushing that language hard, working on those repetitions, trying to get that work done constantly during therapy and then as much as possible outside of therapy so that we can see the ultimate results. So next thing I want to talk about is task analysis, chaining, and prompt fading. So we use what's called task analysis for a lot of the daily living skills. So say we're teaching your child to learn how to brush his teeth. If we did a task analysis of brushing teeth, that means we would just break it down into steps. So the actual steps included in brushing your teeth is quite a few. You'd take out your toothbrush, you would take out the toothpaste, unscrew the cap, put toothpaste on your toothbrush, stick it under water, then brush your teeth in all the different parts. Then you'd spit the toothpaste out, you'd rinse your toothbrush, you'd put your toothpaste back, you'd put your toothbrush back, you turn off the water, all that kind of stuff. So that's lots of steps. And so when we do a task analysis, we chain all those steps together and we decide, we evaluate what the child can do independently. And so say they can do the first 2 steps of the 10-step task analysis. We're going to let them do those 2 steps independently, and then we're going to prompt through, maybe hand over hand, have the child do the rest of the steps. Then we're going to systematically fade those prompts back until the child can do the entire chain of tasks in that task analysis. So one thing we have to be really careful of in any daily living skill is prompt dependence. I am so guilty of this with my children sometimes. I've been making my children oatmeal, for example, for the longest time, thinking they can't make their own oatmeal. They're not old enough for that. Then one weekend when I was out of town, my son made his own oatmeal because I wasn't home. So what I didn't realize was he was prompt dependent on me to make his own oatmeal, where he had the skill all along, but I wasn't making him do it. So as parents, it's so easy to fall into this. And that's where, as parents and therapists, I really want to recommend you analyze that and you fade back those prompts as much as possible. If your child can put on their coat themselves, let them. If they can zip it themselves, let them. I know sometimes logistically that's hard because when they do it themselves, it's messier, it takes longer. There's some logistical reasons. Sometimes we choose not to let our child do it independently. If you're going to be late for something, you're just going to put it on and go. So that happens. But if you have time and the patience in that moment to let your child work through something and try to have them do it independently, that's really going to help because they need that practice to gain that independence. So much of how people learn is just through repetition. And so that's part of what therapy is. We're just trying to create as many repetitions so that the child can practice the skills that they need to develop. And so through task analysis, chaining, prompt fading, things like that, we're working on those independent skills to get them more independent and fading ourselves out of it. Sometimes to fade ourselves out of it, we also use visuals or gesture prompts, things like that, so we're not as hands-on with the prompting. So the last thing I want to talk about is what's called motivating operations. So there's two types of motivating operations. There's establishing motivating operations, and then there's abolishing motivating operations. So if we want your child to learn, we need your child to be motivated. And so we need to analyze what things in the environment are helping or hurting a child to be motivated. So if a child has what's called an abolishing motivating operation, what that means is something is wrecking the child's motivation. So take, for example, we want to use M&Ms or the iPad. Let's go with the iPad. We want to use the iPad to motivate the child. We want the child to focus on a task and work really hard, and then at the end of that task, he can have the iPad. Well, if he had the iPad for 3 hours before therapy started, then therapy starts and we're like, hey, we're gonna make you work for this. He might be thinking to himself, I just had it for 3 hours. I don't really care anymore. I don't need it. Or if it's M&Ms, I'm so full of M&Ms. I had too many. I don't want them anymore. So that wrecks the motivation. What used to be a reward for the child is no longer rewarding because he was satiated with it. He got too much of it, and then it wasn't motivating. So a lot of times when we're looking for rewards for children, we're looking for rewards that the child would not have access to otherwise. So that is an abolishing motivating operation. An establishing motivating operation is something that's going to increase the child's motivation. So, in contrast, if the child didn't have any M&Ms, if the child didn't have his iPad for a long time, then he's going to be more motivated to work for it. He's going to be willing then to do a little extra effort to get what he wants because he really wants that item and hasn't had it for a long time. So as therapists and parents, we need to analyze those variables so that they can work in our favor, because they're either going to help us achieve our goals or they're going to hurt achieving our goals. Other things that can influence motivating operations is sleep deprivation or illness. If a child is really tired, they're less likely to focus, they're less likely to be motivated. So that would be an abolishing operation. Same thing if they're sick. That's going to be an abolishing operation that's going to hurt their motivation. So we want to do everything in our power to have them eating right, have them sleeping right, and all of those things in order for motivation to be where we want it. Now, as a parent and a therapist, I know that sleeping and eating are two really big tasks that kids struggle with, and as parents, sometimes we get frustrated because we feel like we're doing everything we can to get them to sleep well and eat well, and they are fighting us on it. They are resisting it. And so please know that your therapy team can absolutely help with that. We can make plans for sleeping. We can make food programs to expand their eating. We can work on those issues if you're experiencing abolishing operations of sleep deprivation or really limited diets. Those are going to get in the way of learning. And so we want to partner with you to help resolve those issues so that we can keep your child as focused and motivated and healthy as possible so that they can learn the most that they can. So I went over a lot of terms with you today in this video. I'm going to review them all one more time. And hopefully this is helpful for you. If you want to learn more about these strategies, if you want to see them modeled for you, talk to your therapy team. They can show you how it's done. They can tell you how they've used it with your child and how you can apply it too. So Starting at the beginning, natural environment teaching. This is intentionally creating scenarios that would happen in everyday life to work on certain skills. So whatever your child's skill deficits are, you're creating those opportunities to practice them. So whether it's going outside and playing or just having the child make a meal for supper, wherever your child's at, you're just intentionally creating scenarios in everyday life to help your child practice skills. The next one, discrete trials. This is a table time activity where we're doing tons of repetitions of specific skills, working on helping your child be able to identify things, categorize things, and move on from there. Next one is functional communication training. This is where we're using what the child is motivated for to get them to talk and to use their environment to motivate them to get more words out. And so the next one is task analysis, chaining, and prompt fading. This is where we're breaking skills down into tasks and then prompting the child through those tasks and eventually fading our prompts out so that the child can be motivated. And then last but not least is the motivating operations. We have establishing motivating operations, which means we are controlling the exposure to rewards and things like that to increase the child's motivation. So if the child's working for M&Ms, he can't have M&Ms until he earns it so that he's extra motivated to have it. Then we have abolishing operations, and that's where things ruin the motivation of the child. So that's where if he's working for M&Ms, we give him a ton of M&Ms, and then he's no longer motivated to work for them because he just had a whole bunch of them. So that would be the contrast of establishing motivating operations and abolishing motivating operations. So as you work with your child, as your therapists work with your child, we're constantly thinking about how can we increase independence? How can we make your child more capable? And so these are some of the strategies that we use that are based in science that have shown over 30 years and thousands of studies that they work. And so the biggest thing is just providing that opportunity to practice, fading back our prompts so the child isn't dependent on us to do it for them. These strategies work really well. Talk to your therapist if you want to learn more about it, or you can contact me personally as well and I can work with you. All right, thank you so much. I hope this video was helpful to you.